Anindya, welcome to In the Spotlight.
Thank you.
You and I, we started our careers, let's say 2.5 decades back, and that time there was nothing called as data.
And I was reading somewhere that in 2025, we will have around 180 zettabytes of data, and I had to look out for what is a zettabyte. Actually go out, there are aggregators who would sell your phone number, your PAN number for just a few paisa. It is not even a rupee. You can buy lakhs and crores of such customer data, and then you are free to use that.
Whilst we said that AI is here to stay and it's not going to take away jobs, can you throw more light on human touch? Because while AI is powerful, many people still value the human interaction.
Things are changing at such a rapid pace. Like generative AI is already changing the way we run our businesses. Anything is possible, but whatever happens, I think it all happens for the general good is what I think, I believe.
Hello everyone and welcome to another exciting episode of In the Spotlight, a podcast by Aditya Birla Capital. And joining us today, we have Anindya Karmakar, Head of Digital and Analytics at Aditya Birla Capital. Anindya brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in leveraging data and artificial intelligence to drive business transformation and enhance customer experiences. In this episode, we will dive deep into the power of data and how it serves as the foundation for modern businesses. We will discuss how Aditya Birla Capital transforms raw data into actionable insights, the role of AI in creating value for customers, and the potential of generative AI, the buzzword in the financial sector. Whether you are a data enthusiast, a business leader, or simply curious about the future of AI in financial services, this episode is packed with valuable insights and thought-provoking discussions. So sit back, relax, and join us as we uncover the transformative power of data and AI with Anindya Karmakar. And Anindya, welcome to In the Spotlight.
Thank you.
Anindya, today's topic is very interesting because you and I, we started our careers, let's say 2.5 decades back, and that time there was nothing called as data. I mean, AI ka to koi zamana bhi nahi tha. So from there, if you see how the world has moved, like there was a whole manufacturing and industrialization, era, came the consumerism era. I think that's the time when I started my career. Came the whole .com and the whole internet .com era. And that's the time, like a decade and a half back, where data started becoming, some noise, and then the whole big data world came in. We move into digital economy now. So what has been your journey and how do you see this entire space evolve, Anindya?
Absolutely right, Darshana. In fact, you're right. I mean, 2.5 decades back, data was not really spoken about that much. And well, if you take it back 20, 30 years, a bit of the digital had started. I think there was a dawn of the digital. You can talk about the dawn of the digital. Maybe it was the 90s. I think some companies, at least the company that I worked for, they had started looking at putting data into some system. But this data was actually coming on paper.
Oh, absolutely.
And even the systems where you were putting the data, they were not very evolved. So I remember when it kind of ran out of space, then you had to take a copy of that in a secondary storage and then take all of those tapes back, into some place and keep it there. Okay. And if you had to retrieve it, it was a few days process. If you had to retrieve some of this old data, it was a few days process. But I think, interestingly, you mentioned the internet boom, which started at the turn of the century.
Yeah.
And that is the time when I think the data started kind of expanding. You had a data deluge. And it actually happened more once the smartphone revolution came. And with that, the social media. That was, I think, the 2010s. That's the time. Towards the later part of the 2000, you had iPhone getting launched. And then you had all the social media platforms, coming up. And that really led to a lot of data getting generated, across. And I was reading somewhere that in 2025, we will have around 180 zettabytes of data, and I had to look out
Wow.
for what is a zettabyte, and
Correct.
I don't know how many zeros are there in zettabyte. So to put this in perspective, a zettabyte is something. If you put all the movies, if you think about, let's say, a disk, we used to have disk at that point of
Hard
time. We
disk,
used to store
yeah.
data. If a disk was huge, in terms of the width, and it actually went all the way up to the moon from the Earth, 1,300 times of that is one zettabyte.
Wow.
1,300 times of that, and 180 zettabytes of that is going to get generated in 2025. Another very interesting, example
I can't
I
even honestly visualize this. I
visualize,
don't
right?
even know what this
Yeah.
is.
For example, we generate, so many photographs. If in our entire lifetime, if for every second we took a picture and we stored it, it will take us millions of lifetimes to occupy one zettabyte.
Wow.
That's really what a zettabyte is, and that's the kind of data that is going to get generated in 2025. That's basically what people are, talking about.
Immediately, like in
Next
2025,
year,
next
yeah,
year.
next year, right? So that's the kind of data that we are producing. But with that, I think, I think if there is an opportunity, we should talk about, this whole privacy issue, because in the 2010s, right, when all this social media was expanding, and we have read about Facebook, it ran into problems. People started using it, but they were not very uh, focused on what's happening to the data. But very soon they realized, that's being sold,
Correct.
and the privacy is pretty much gone, right? It's evaporated in air, and a lot of laws, etc., started coming in. In fact, India also started thinking about some of those things towards the later part of the 2010s, about 2018, 19, and now we also have a law. So a lot is now happening around this piece, and which basically makes you wonder, uh, as an organization, what do you do with that data? How do you harness that data? How do you use that data? How do you create value out of the data? So interesting times. The economy has turned from industrial to digital. What you're talking about. At that point of time, data, there was no way to store the data. Today you can store the data.
But you bought something, interesting. So while we were looking at this turn of economy and, Anandya, where like I remember there used to be this whole big data and, data is everything and the big data world to data is the new oil.
While data is the new oil, and it's a very good analogy. The key difference you pointed out, right? Oil is limited, right?
Correct.
Data is unlimited. But the analogy is very good. It's very nice, because when you think about oil, you cannot use oil without processing it, without taking it through a process of cleaning, and
You
then
can't just use
taking it to
crude
the
oil. You
end
can't.
consumer. You can't
Yeah.
use crude oil.
Correct.
And to a large extent, data can be thought about it in the same fashion. When data is getting generated, it has to be cleaned, processed, transformed in some way before you start actually getting value, out of the data. To that extent, it is the oil of the digital economy, but it is unlimited, right? It is getting generated, and
All the
more and
time.
more and more of it, with every passing day. That's the only difference, that I can see with the oil. So, yeah.
Interesting. Coming to what you mentioned about privacy and the whole DPDP, Act and the protection bill that even India is focusing now. But like we said, I mean, I really know that the whole fear that started in the consumer's mind that, I mean, today, even when you're talking and you feel your phones are listening, your television is listening, and suddenly they'll throw you some, ads to you. And that's where the whole data privacy became a big topic in the last couple of years. So can you throw more light on what is this whole act about and what are people doing for the data privacy?
The Act, very simply put, talks about how do you protect the digital data of an individual. And that's basically the problem area that they have defined. It takes into account a lot of the things which has already happened in the in for example in GDPR, which was implemented in Europe, but it actually has been contextualized for India.
Okay.
And in a nutshell, it's a very intuitive thing. If I am generating some data, then I should have control over it. And if I've given that data for any organization, it should be for a very specific use that I give that data. And therefore, the organization is not free to use their data for anything else. And if they want to use it for anything else, obviously they have to come back and take my consent again. So it's a consent based architecture. It puts the individual in control of his or her own data. And it's interesting because most of the data that is getting generated today is digital in nature. And how do you basically ensure that it is not getting misused? And we read a lot of these things. There is the potential to misuse is enormous, because
Correct.
if it gets into the hands of a wrong person, a wrong entity, or an organization which basically has malified intent, a lot can go wrong. And we have seen that happening. But this realization has started coming in only after people realize that it has started to get misused. And we know so many examples in our context itself where we have given the data, and you get calls from people unknown to you. You don't even know how they got your data.
Correct.
So everyone's data today is outside, available. In fact, freely available at a very low cost. In fact, this data does not even have too much of value. If you actually go out, there are aggregators who would, sell your phone number, your PAN number, for just a few paisa. It is not even a rupee. For a very few paisas, you can buy lakhs and crores of such customer data, and then you're free to use that. I think a lot of that, over a period of time, will start getting checked. In fact, the larger organizations will take the first step, for obviously, because they have their reputation to protect, and they don't want to obviously be on the wrong side of any law. And slowly, if that starts happening, slowly, I think it will trickle down to the larger economy, and we will all be much better off compared to what we are today.
So interesting. Anindya has thrown light to the act which is called the Digital Personal Data Protection. And that's where, where the organizations have to become more data conscious. The individuals are more data conscious today and how they are living the footprint. But Anindya, that brings me to another topic where, as marketeers and people are constantly grappling, there was this whole thing around first party, second party, third party, and what you're talking about, this whole data available, which is your third party data
Yeah.
aggregators, and it's available in Paise and a lot. But that also, again, is going to at some point very soon stop.
Yes.
And organizations have to focus, marketeers have to focus on generating more and more around first party data. Can you decode for our listeners and consumers what do we mean by first, second, and third
Yes.
party data, and what does it really mean?
Yes. In fact, it's a very critical concept in today's world. First party data simply means that any organization gets the data directly from its customer. It could be through a web application, a mobile application, through the CRM. Every time the customer comes in
It
touch
could be through the forms also that they're
through the
filling,
forms
right?
that you
Yeah.
fill up, every time the customer comes in touch with an organization through any channel, there is a direct connect with the organization, leave some data, that becomes your first party data. It's always more trustworthy, it is more transparent, and it is cleaner. You can do much more with that kind of a data. Second party data is someone else's first party data. So, in today's economy, you have to do business with a lot of partnerships. It is just not viable anymore to do business all by yourself. And therefore, if you have got in touch with or partnered with someone else who is getting a customer, and that entity is passing on the information about the customer to you, then that becomes your second party data.
Yeah, because first party is also very expensive, the cost of.
First party is also very expensive. Whereas third party data, as you rightly mentioned, is something which does not belong to anyone, but you are aggregating it from multiple sources. And a good example would be the cookie data is a very good example,
Yeah.
where in fact Google is coming and talking about that you cannot store third party data anymore, and at least on their browser they are talking and trying to come up with something which restricts people to start using that data.
I think
And we
that's
all
been the
know
scare. That's
that's been
been
the
the scare
scare.
for some time. Yes,
Absolutely,
Google.
absolutely. and
Yeah,
and and that's scary for the marketeers,
correct.
because you don't know, you can't now look at the behavior of the customer. But what has been happening is that people have been dropping cookies left, right, and center, and you really don't know who is looking at your data.
True.
It is completely, it's like very dark outside there. You don't know who is looking at your data and who is silently dropping a cookie. You may or may not even have visited that website, who is now dropping a cookie on some other page that you are visiting.
Wow.
For example, civil data is also a third party data. So civil, in the case of lending, any bureau data, credit bureau data is third party data, because they are accumulating data from multiple banks and NBFCs, and they are then giving it to you. So third party data, all of them is not bad, but I think some of them, for example, the ones that Google is talking about, is definitely something which is uh, probably which is going to go away, also because of DPDP. Because DPDP Act is also talking about, you cannot, without the customer's consent, store that data. And as we know, some of these data is not consented data, and therefore that also is likely to go away. So what looks like in the future is that we will have to rely more and more in terms of first and second party data, which is consented, which the customer knows, is aware about, is giving it to you. And then how do we use some of this data to create value, back to our stakeholders and especially the customer.
Interesting. So, first party data is my organization's own data. Second is where we've partnered with someone and where we are getting. And third is really where we have these aggregators. And you are right, it's scary. If imagine my data getting sold at couple of paise. I mean, as a customer, as a consumer, I'm absolutely not happy about. And since we're talking about the whole, data, let's talk about the power of data. And Anindya, you just spoke about something which is even more scary. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. This whole zettabyte, right?
Zettabyte.
Zettabyte. Oh my God, I can't even understand that. But if that's where we are moving, and I was first going to talk to you about 2030, but let's say 2025 only, where if this is where the world is moving in, what is closer home? What is our business at Aditya Birla Capital, and what is our data strategy, and how are we looking at it?
So for any organization, and not specifically for Aditya Birla Capital, any organization would actually look at the data strategy in 5 different pillars. Okay, the first one is, how do you? It's called ingestion. How do you ingest data?
Okay.
So data is coming inside the organization through multiple sources. These sources could be, as we spoke about, could be mobile, could be web, could be your CRM, could be someone walking into your branch,
So
could
it's
be
physical or digital?
physical or digital,
Yeah.
could be from your
Social.
partners, social, all these sources, right? When the data comes in, it has to come and then get stored in some server. That the entire process is called ingestion. Now this is very raw. This data is very raw. Once you have got the data, the next pillar in which your strategy typically would revolve around is called the integration. Now this data has to be transformed, cleaned, and made ready to use
Okay.
by people who are, let's say, in analytics, people, in, I'm talking about our industry, it could be finance. You have to send, share data to the regulators, and so data has to be used, right? But it has to be
Even
first transformed.
marketing.
Marketing,
For a lot of-
how do you want to reach out to the customers? So that is your second. The third is how you start using that data. So all your dashboards, which are used for decision making, all the analytical models that the analytical teams would be making in terms of predicting what will happen, all of that is called usage. An extension of usage is also innovation, because you would innovate using data, because it is so plenty nowadays. You would start looking at data in multiple ways, and every time you look at data in a different way, there is a new story typically which starts coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. They say that too much of data analysis is paralysis because
Yes.
you're constantly trying in newer ways.
Yes. So with the help of experience, people who actually know what to look at, if you start looking at data in multiple different angles, a new story may start emerging, and that may help organizations to innovate on their products and services, which is something which, let's say, people wouldn't have thought about. So that's an extension of usage, but typically it's good to think about that as another pillar. And the final one is how you monitor, maintain this data across the organization, because it's important that this data is available when you want it. It is trustworthy. It maintains, it kind of is within the guardrails of all your laws, the privacy laws that we spoke about.
So that's the governance
That is
side?
the governance, that is the maintenance, and there is a lot of storage, retrieval, backup. What happens if your systems go back. So the entire piece basically is the maintenance of the data. So a data strategy in any organization typically would have a combination of these five things. And so do we have some of these things. And very quickly, what organizations are realizing, that if you have to implement a good comprehensive data strategy, then some of the infrastructure that legacy organizations have been sitting on is just not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you have to store this kind of
Yes,
data,
and the reason for that, Darshana, is that today there's a lot of unstructured data, as you call it. So there is structured data, there is unstructured data. Let me first define what these two are.
yeah, if you
A structured data is something which typically can be put in rows and columns. So the names of customers, for example, their date of birth, some identification that they have, let's say in our case, Aadhaar or PAN card or whatever it is, right? We are talking to each other, we are generating data.
correct.
Now, this is unstructured data. This cannot be put into rows and columns. The video which is being taken, for our conversation, this is unstructured data.
Interesting.
The pictures, the music that we create, anything, these are all unstructured data. The text
Wow.
that we write, the emails that customers write to us.
So there's so much unstructured data today. Imagine, so you're saying video, your voice, your images, your
Absolutely.
graphics, and everything,
Absolutely.
your text, and
Absolutely.
so much of unstructured
So
data.
much of unstructured data. In fact, unstructured data is the one which is actually exploded when we talk about those zettabytes. So the old infrastructure in the organizations typically were made to store structured data. And there is a limitation to what you can do with structured data, right? Beyond a point, there is only so much that you can do about it. For example, you can't understand the behavior of customers beyond a point much, with your structured data, because what the customer is doing on your app, on social media, how much time he or she is spending on your pages, what mail the customer has written to us, and what was the whether the tone of the mail was of anger, of joy, of satisfaction, you cannot make out from structured data. And therefore, to understand the customer more and more, and to customize the experience, based on that, is something that you cannot do, and therefore you need unstructured data. And for that, there is a completely new infrastructure and architecture of data, which has come into picture. And organizations are, like I said, realizing that they need to now start evolving. And most of it has happened over the last decade. It is not very old.
Yeah, so I remember, I was in retail earlier in our retail stores, and that's the time we would, and that's when the big data thing happened, and we were still doing our data modeling on our loyalty programs on the entire structure of the transactional data. How much is the customer buying? And from there, the whole digital economy and the social economy suddenly boomed up. And in this decade, now we're saying that then came the whole hype that, oh, I want to know the unsaid behavior, because this I can see transactional.
Yes.
What are they doing on the social? What are
Yes.
they talking? What are their behavior on the different other things outside the shopping cart?
Yes.
And that's where I think the whole unstructured data. And I think with this, Anand, is becoming more and more complex. And as marketeers, also for us, that where we used to target people like you and the whole from there it has become the whole hyper personalization, because that's where the world is
Yes.
moving, that
Yes.
people only you, the whole n is equal to 1. So
Yes.
can you tell more on that? How does this work then?
It uses a lot of unstructured data, and then there is a new technology, which we are all aware of now, which is artificial intelligence, AI. That's the umbrella term, but it's again useful to think of AI as pre-November 2022, and I'll tell you the significance of that month, and
Yeah,
post-November
before the
2022.
OpenAI.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You bang on. OpenAI launched ChatGPT, put into the hands of, because of course the work has been going on for many years before that, but it came into our hands to use generative AI in November 2022. And there was a lot of technology which existed before, and as organizations, we have used many of them
True.
to benefit our customers. Uh, but you mentioned that AI is very recent, probably in the last 30 years. The reason for that is that it was being used by researchers, by the scientists. It was not in the mainstream. And that's why we don't get to know. In fact, there was an experiment, for example, that was, it's known as Turing test. Alan Turing was a brilliant British mathematician. In fact, there is a movie on Alan Turing by the name of The Imitation Game. So in 1950, he came up with this whole thought experiment. It was not a thought experiment, actually, it was an experiment. It's called the Turing test, where he said that if a machine answers a question asked by a human and you're not able to distinguish whether it was a machine or a human, then you pass the Turing test.
Wow.
It was way back in
That time,
in 1950.
what we call as bots and
Yes.
things now. That
And he did that, right? And there was this judge who had two terminals in front of him, and it was only text, right? So you would basically type in your question on both the machines, and you get an answer. Actually, there is a human who is answering behind one of those monitors, and there is a machine which is answering. And if this judge is not able to distinguish which is a machine and which is a human, then you have passed the Turing test. So this was the experiment that he conducted in 1950.
I wonder what if astrologers also started using predictive AI. I don't know which one is working better.
They have their own AI. They would.
So, coming from augmented reality, where do we see us moving now?
Generative AI is something that is at a very early stage, and there is a lot, which is happening, and a lot is happening because some of the chips, which typically were used in computers earlier, they are just not enough to kind of manage some of the generative AI use cases. And you would, when you think of chips, you think of, the small things which go inside computers. Now chips have become bigger. But although they physically become bigger, they actually pack in billions and billions of more transistors inside, that space.
Oh.
And the old CPU that we were used to, they are not even capable of doing more than 2, 3, 5% of what today we need. And therefore, a lot of the work actually gets transferred to some of the new age, chips, which is NVIDIA is, now the market leader for the
Yes,
GPUs.
yes.
So a lot of the capacity, the computational power, and the energy which is basically going into computing some of these things is improving. The efficiency is improving day by day. And therefore, generative AI, and I think we should spend some time to understand what exactly this is something that is going to change. It's already started changing in our lives in so many different ways. It is mainstream, but I don't think the adoption is still that widespread. And it is not a hype. I don't think it is a hype because there are very, very clear outcome in terms of using this technology. Many technologies, actually most of them, when you think about them, they come in, there is a hype gets built, and then it dies down. In
So,
fact,
we were saying generative AI is here to stay, right?
here to stay,
It's part of our
absolutely
lives.
here to stay. And there is a lot which can happen. So, in a nutshell, generative AI is something which generates something, right? So, if you think about the old AI, and we gave the example of,
So,
let's
what
say,
are the types of AI then we have? Like, what is an old AI? So, what can you decode different kind of AI for the
so I
consumer?
spoke about some of them. For example, computer vision, the voice technology, which is your understanding speech,
Yes.
The way our speech is understood is that when you speak something, it gets translated into a text. Then you try to understand the intent, as it is called, of what was requested or asked, and then you get the answer. So the voice technology is one of them. The whole facial recognition, is one
Yes.
such technology. The whole predictive AI is, one technology. These are typically 99% of the AI which is used in financial services would lie somewhere around this. Uh, Machine learning, so predictive AI, and some of these are actually part of machine learning. Generative AI is nothing but it generates new content.
So that's the difference. It's generating on its
It's
own.
generating on its own, and and a good way to think about this, and if I go back to the example that I was taking, that you can upload the photograph of your car, if it has got damaged. What that technology does is that it goes and you have trained it to identify different kinds of dents and scratches, but you have trained it for a very specific purpose. Very specific purpose.
Right.
So if a dent looks like this, then this is probably how you estimate the damage. Obviously, a lot has gone into training. You would have, put a lot of images, of dents and scratches, and then you have trained the machine. But it is for a very, very specific,
Use
use
case.
case, very specific.
So one of the important, interesting thing about any technology is when it comes in, there's a lot of excitement, but it also brings a lot of fear. And every time we've seen when the whole voice technology came in, that was the fear that will people lose their jobs because voice is here. AI came in, and now this whole Gen AI. And I was reading in on LinkedIn that more than half of the jobs in India will be affected by AR as per LinkedIn data. And Indian professionals are using AI skills more than anywhere else in the world. So, again, there's a lot of fear around people losing jobs. And what are your views on this?
So it's a very interesting and timely question, but it has been timely for many decades.
Yeah.
Every time a new technology has come, these questions have come. There always has been fear in some people's mind. And I would want you to visualize going into Henry Ford's factory when the Model T was getting rolled out.
Wow. I'm going there.
and and you would imagine at that point of time the horse carriages and the people who operated those horse carriages had the same question, right? So what will this do to our jobs?
Existential issues.
Some people came and said, if these cars are on the road, will that increase accidents? Will this kill people? So there is always a fear about something which is new, but it has only improved the lives of people. Productivities have become better, economies have prospered with every new technology, as long as you have controlled the use of that technology. So this question is always there, but if you think about this clearly, in fact, in the last 10 years or 15 years, or even this century, last couple of decades, technology has only made things better. What has changed is that every time a new technology has come, at least pre November 2022, you have always seen that efficiencies have improved,
Correct.
which means that any job which was repetitive in nature has kind of got automated, okay, in one way or the other. So, the good way to think about it is that what is the repetitive part of my job, and that is always at the risk of getting automated. But
So, there will be some risk. It's just that people.
yeah, so but I don't think I see this as a risk. You can call it my optimism, but the point is that it always gives you then more bandwidth to move away from the repetitive job and do something which is more meaningful in terms of, let's say, in our industry, building relationships, with our customers and with our
Yes.
stakeholders.
Yes.
So a part of that time was getting taken away because you were doing that repetitive job. So that has kind of started getting eliminated, and in most of the organizations they now understand. Of course, many people have spoken about this before generative AI, is that if you are creative, then that cannot be taken away. I think a lot of those assumptions have got challenged after generative AI has come. And you know this,
Yeah, absolutely.
Darshana, better than anyone else. In fact, generative AI today can generate images. pretty much customized on the fly.
Images, scripts, you have your mid journeys, you have everything happening.
And for things that you went to a creative agency,
Correct.
a lot of those things will ultimately go away. But I think we can all take comfort in the fact that every time something new like this has come, which is transformative in many different levels, it has only led to something better.
So, in fact, what was in my mind, you already sort of put some thought for our listeners because, yes, generative AI is here to stay. Yes, it is disrupting a lot of things. But that means that as people, we will have to continuously upskill ourselves. In fact, that was my next question, that what kind of skills is important for individuals to thrive in this AI powered, future.
I was listening to Jensen Huang, who is Nvidia's founder's
Founder.
CEO,
Yeah.
and he said something which is very interesting. He said that technologies like generative AI have completely closed the gap of technology literacy. What he meant was, and he actually mentioned this, is that anyone pretty much who has come and spoken about what matters and all, everyone has said that you must do something around computer science, around coding. He says
And that was
that
daunting for, layman to do some coding
yes,
and
you need to learn coding,
yeah.
and I have so many of my friends and colleagues whose kids really are learning. But what he says is that coding is nothing but learning how to write a language. At the back of it, it is logic, right? Everyone today is a coder. Why? Because you can write your code in the language that you speak, and that gets converted into a computer code by some of the softwares which are already existing. Now, learning coding, therefore, should it go away? Should it not go away? It still has its use, because if you learn how to code, then you're still developing your logical thinking, your critical thinking. Some of those things you need. So, what is needed, is how you are able to think critically.
But interesting, that brings to my next question is the kind of command that you give, the whole use of LLM.
Yes.
So can you throw light on them? Because
Yes.
I was learning how to give more longer prompts and longer,
Right.
questions, and it was then giving me better answers. And it was very different behavior
Yes.
through what earlier I used to do on Safari or let's say
Yes.
on Google.
This is another very interesting question. I'll tell you why. We are at a very, very early stage of generative AI. And today there is something of prompt engineering as a skill, which people have started talking about. Again, when you hear, people who are really at the cutting edge of this technology, who are actually driving this forward, they will tell you that every time you write a prompt, the machine is learning more and more about you. Okay? So let's say you get into a very lengthy conversation with the machine, and you keep writing your prompts, you don't like the answer, you write something else, and so on and so forth. Next time you write a prompt, it actually improves the quality of your prompt at the back end before it goes and fetches and creates an answer for you. So going forward, it wouldn't matter whether you are a good prompt writer or not. It knows so much about you already
Oh, so my data is
that,
already there learning on
yeah,
my
it
behavior.
understands about you when you write a prompt what you mean. And so it goes and polishes that prompt at the back end before going and finding an answer for you. Right? So some of these things are already happening. We don't get to know about these things because we feel, and so for example, prompt engineering came. It will probably survive for a couple of years, 2 years, 3 years. What happens to that skill? My view is that it will be gone. You don't need to go and do a course on prompt engineering because suddenly that's a
Absolutely.
really in thing to do, and that makes you employable
So
somewhere.
is prompt engineering is what your large language modeling or the LLM, is
Yes.
it the same or?
So the large language model is the model which generates language, it's text. So it generates text, right? A generative AI can generate text,
Correct.
videos, images, and so on. LLM is the one which generates your text. It's a language model,
Okay.
right?
But prompt engineering is over and
Yes.
above
So
it?
prompt is the command
Okay.
that you give to the model, for whatever you want an answer for. The better the prompt, and that's what they say, right? The more vague you leave the prompt, with the machine, you get a vague answer, and then you don't like the answer, and therefore you would. Some of the prompts can run into pages.
Wow.
Okay, so some of the prompts, because the more specific you are in terms of what you are asking, it is able to generate a very specific answer for you. But obviously, I mean, we will not write pages of prompts, but I know in research, etc., what I've read is that you would typically write pages because at the back end, information is vast. What information gets picked up will completely depend upon how you have written your prompt.
So coming to like you said, so while people are reskilling and upskilling themselves and things are here to stay, what about organizations? Because I know that earlier when the digital time came in, the digital whole era, it was not just about a digital as a department, but entire organization horizontally
Yes.
had to think digitally. Similarly, now data in an organization does it sit vertically in a department or does it become a culture? Does it cut across horizontally? What are your views there?
So it's a very good question, Darshana. Data and digital both have to become the DNA, of the organization, and therefore, I read somewhere the CEO of the future has to be a data and digital guy, because today everything runs on digital,
Correct.
and if the board, the CEO, the CXO, all of them do not understand this, and if it is just a department, I think it will not. That organization will find very difficult to survive
Or scale.
or scale up, right?
Yes.
And therefore, it has to be the DNA. But to build a DNA which is data first and digital first is easier said than done, because you have people in an organization. What's the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge is not that people do not understand or appreciate it. The biggest challenge is the own behavior and how to change that, and how to change the organization as a whole so that everyone can come together and then work on that agenda. Again, a lot of the things that you are doing today and which have made you successful, how do you take care of that? So how do you blend what the future is going to be with what we are doing at present, and
So
what
it's
has
more
made successful?
adapting what I
How do you
have
adapt
today and
the
balance.
mindset,
Yeah.
the culture? How do you change the culture? And change the culture not of one person, right? Of the entire organization.
Correct.
It always has to be top down, in bits and pieces, in pockets, and it has to be walking the talk. So you have to start doing things which basically then is adopted, by people across the organization. Yeah. So the short answer to the question, it has to be horizontal. It cannot be one team and one function really bearing the entire responsibility for the organization.
I like the line you said that the CEOs of future have to be data and digitally savvy or ready, and that's for all the listeners that everybody who's planning to or looking at a career to become the CEO have to be ready. You cannot go away. I think the biggest problem is also the mindset to constantly, because the way things are coming today, it's not about every couple of years, it's every couple of months now. So to
Yes.
learn and unlearn and constantly skill yourself, and like you said, also hold on to what really makes a culture. So to really bring in the balance, because what the knowledge, the core knowledge, and bring in the new and blend the whole thing together.
Yes.
So yes, that is important.
And I can give you a very specific example of data as a culture. This does not come very naturally to most of us.
Absolutely.
When we think about our business, there are many problems that we deal with on a daily basis in our business, and we try to solve them. What doesn't come naturally to most of us is that, do we think about that business problem in data terms? Okay. What I mean to say is that if I have a business question, can I naturally convert that into an analytics question?
I don't think that's how we are wired.
We are not wired
Yeah,
that
we
way.
don't. We know
Because the
business.
moment you change that into an analytics question, then you will try to find an answer from data. So analytics answer will basically what will come out. And then you change that or transform that solution into a business solution, a solution that has been provided. Data will provide you insights. Data will give you the stories. you convert that into a business solution, and then you implement it. Now, this entire thinking at every level in the organization is something which has to be built as a culture. And any change that you want to make in a culture always takes time. We
Takes
know
time.
that.
Yes.
But there has to be a concerted effort top down to make sure that this happens. And that's how your entire organization starts thinking about data. Then all the problems that you have about data, because then there is a push from business that I need an answer from data. And then if there is something which is, let's say, old, creaky, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the way you manage your data, then the pressure starts coming back because you already are seeing value, and therefore you want to change that, right? So the entire organization then starts gearing up to address some of those challenges.
How are we managing that, Aditya Birla Capital, this change?
It's a very good question. So I think some of the things is what you're building this in terms of sharing, the stories, success stories, which is coming out of, let's say, one business, right? You want to uh, democratize that, practice or the story, so that everyone knows this is happening. And then, of course, making people accountable for making sure that they have to walk this path, and they have to actually, again, we have always spoken with our leaders, the senior most leaders, and told them that this is something they have to percolate down their team, so that it becomes a habit. So a lot of people, sitting at senior levels, they look at that data. But how do you make sure that even the last mile is also using the same data and using that to drive their business? It takes effort. It takes obviously a process. You need the right technology. You need the right set of people to be driving that. So this is basically what we have tried to do, to one by one, for every business, every function, we basically said that this is what you will have to drive across your organization. One very simple thing that we have said is that when you are discussing in your own meetings, uh, make sure that there is an analytics person sitting in that meeting, right?
Nice.
Because typically we would do our meetings and we would come out and we would not know whether there was data which could have given me an answer. So any meeting that we are doing, right, it could be a structured meeting, or you could just want to do some meeting unstructured, and you basically call someone who understands what kind of data the organization has, a person from analytics, right, and, a business analyst. And if you start doing that, these small steps basically start changing the culture, the way you look at your business problems.
Very nice. I think it's a very different take on how otherwise, organizations are used to. And that brings me to just another question on this whole AI and what we were talking. Whilst we said that AI is here to stay and it's not going to take away jobs, can you throw more light on human touch? Because while AI is powerful, many people still value the human interaction, and we ultimately want that human touch at the end of the day. So, how does ABC strike the right balance between AI powered automation and human touch in its customer interactions?
So we talk about general intelligence, AGI, artificial general intelligence, where we believe, watch Hollywood movies, and you would imagine that that's a world which is coming fast at us, where machines have consciousness
Yes,
and
the
they'll
whole
start behaving like humans.
sci-fi.
But depending upon who you're talking to, you will get very different answers. But most people actually believe that that's very far away. So machines today are not capable for empathy. They're not capable to connect, with another person
True.
at the same level, and that's going to perhaps take a long time, for multiple reasons, and we don't need to get into that today. So while the basic things, in terms of productivity, efficiency, technology can come and help. And therefore, I like this whole word called co-pilot, which Microsoft has brought in.
Yeah.
So you have a pilot, and the human is the pilot, and you have a co-pilot, right? That's the way I don't know why they have coined that particular thing, but that's how I look at it. that I have a co-pilot which basically helps me do my job better.
Nice. So it's a collaboration
It's a
between
collaboration.
man and
So you're not
machine.
replacing, a human, but you're basically helping and enabling the person to actually do his or her job, better. So the human element is always going to be there, at least for the foreseeable future.
So, Anindya, whilst we discuss such interesting topics, but we are going to have a little fun and have, some engagement like a rapid fire, and you have to say thumbs up or thumbs down. So, should I start?
Yes.
My first question is AI evaluating credit worthiness for loan approvals. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Thumbs up. Automated customer service chatbots. Thumbs up. Using AI for hiring decisions.
Oh, that's a tough one. Uh, I think I've used it. So thumbs up.
So, thumbs up. Okay.
Yes.
Using drones for home deliveries.
That's we don't know how that'll happen, but especially in the high rises in Mumbai. But why not? Yes.
Yeah, at least it's happening in US.
Yes.
They are doing
Yes.
it. So, robots replacing human workers in factory.
They have already done that. So I would say thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Yes.
Self-driving cars.
It'll never happen in India, but of course, wherever it can happen, why not?
It's already there, right?
It's already there. Not only
Yes.
cars, even the truck drivers are losing their jobs now.
Thank you. I think this was really exciting, and I'm sure our listeners also are learning, breaking some, myths. And also, at the end of the day, it was two humans talking, Anindya and
Yes.
Darshana. We were not two generative
This
AI.
is not AI.
This is not AI-led conversation. So I hope people have enjoyed, and thank you so much for
Thank
being
you
on the
so
show.
much. Thank you so much for having this discussion. Thank you.
And that's a wrap up on today's episode. A big thank you to Anindya Karmakar for sharing such valuable insights into how data and AI are shaping the future of financial services at Aditya Birla Capital. I hope you found our conversation as enlightening as I did. And don't forget to stream the episode on our YouTube channel, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. Stay tuned for more deep dives into the world of finance, tech, and innovation.